What do you do when you are studying cross-cultural psychology and you are getting ready to do a study? Well, there are various things that you should consider before starting your research. One of the things that you should consider is methodological equivalence, or simply that you want to ensure that all parts of your study, the methods, the measures, the questions that you're asking, how you're asking them, what you're asking them to do, that all of these pieces are understood in similar or identical ways across all the cultures that you're looking at. So if you're giving a survey question, if you're asking participants to respond to something, that the understanding between everyone in your study is similar. There are a few ways that you could address methodological equivalence. We won't go through all of them today, but we will go through one, which is back translation. One way to establish equivalence in your study across cultural contexts is to use back translation when your materials are being given in different languages. Let's say you have a study in Korea and you have another study in India, and you plan to have two different sets of your survey. One that's given in the language for each area you're in. One thing you're going to need to do is make sure that when you translate it to these different languages, that the meaning of your questions stay roughly the same. So back translation is basically this method, where you're translating either your survey questions, your research protocols, your instruments, whatever you're using, from one language to another, while maintaining the meaning, while maintaining the core intent behind the questions. And the purpose of this is to de-center language, so that culturally specific concepts are removed and eliminated. And whatever is left over means basically the same thing in all cultures. So, for example, idioms are common phrases that are used to express different concepts or ideas or feelings in different cultures. An example of this could be things like, oh, could you pop the trunk? Right? So if you literally translate, could you pop the trunk to another culture? Will it mean the same thing? To you, that might mean like, oh yeah, can you open the trunk so I can gain access to it? Right? But to another culture, it might mean like, what, you want me to punch the trunk? You want me to shoot the trunk? What do you mean, pop the trunk? So common idioms that may make sense to you and seem like common turns of phrases, when translated to another culture, don't make any sense. So examples like this, where you want to decenter these culture-specific concepts or aspects of language so that you are maintaining methodological, or in this case, linguistic equivalence. So what does back translation look like? Well, one method starts with translating the material from one language to the other, and you do this by hiring a translator or maybe even doing it yourself. After you translate that to another language, you hire a second translator who translates those materials, whatever you had translated, back to the original language. And then you compare. You compare the original and back translated materials together, and then see if there are any differences. If you compare, like, pop the trunk, and you see in the translated materials, when you get back to English, it means shoot up the trunk. It's like, okay, something needs to be changed in that item. The goal of this back and forth is to establish linguistic equivalence, or that the meaning of the language you're using is equivalent across the cultural contexts that you're looking in. Now, aside from thinking about establishing methodological equivalence, another thing you want to consider when starting a study in multiple cultures is understanding the cultural norms, understanding the cultures that you're working in, right? So when you do a study in a culture that you're not familiar with, that you didn't grow up in, that you didn't really have much exposure to, one thing you want to do before doing a study there is maybe learn a bit about that culture. Not surprisingly, right? So there are a few ways that you might do this. And these are not exclusive. You can do more than this. There are other ways you can get to the same deal. But here are 3 recommendations. First, recommendation number 1, read some ethnographies. These are kind of cultural deep dives into a specific context that tell you a rich and detailed description about that culture and possibly different norms or beliefs or values. So, first off, go read something, right? Go read something about that culture. Second, maybe identify some collaborators in that culture, someone that grew up there, someone that has familiarity with that cultural context. Have them work with you on the project. Have them be a second author or even the first author. Who knows? Up to you, your study. But work with someone who knows the culture, right? Work with someone. Read something, work with someone. Last piece is actually immerse yourself to that culture. Maybe if you're doing a study in Germany and you're from La Crosse, maybe you want to go and visit Germany. Maybe you actually want to go visit the country for a bit and immerse yourself in that culture and talk to people in Germany so you can get to learn and know about what German culture is like. And obviously, there are many benefits to this. So you can read, you can work with other people, or you can, just go there. Thinking about the benefits of working with others, if you have a bilingual collaborator, that they can help make sure your translations are linguistically equivalent. They can help you establish various equivalencies in your methods, in however you're constructing your study. Or if you're bilingual yourself, yay, go you. If you're bilingual yourself, you can do that too. Overall, there are many things that you should think about before conducting a study looking at different cultures. And these considerations are ones that potentially are unique to cross-cultural research. If you're doing research that is centered in one culture, you don't got to think about translating things. You don't got to think about reading about a culture you don't have any familiarity with. So these and other considerations should be on your mind as you're doing work in other cultural contexts.